Calling to order the Wednesday, March 17th, 2021 meeting of the Brainerd Planning Commission. David, would you go ahead and proceed with roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yeager.
Yes.
Gorham.
Yes.
Woodward.
Yes.
Calroos. Erickson.
Yes.
Foley.
Here.
And Duval.
Here. All righty. Moving on to the next item. Would anyone like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
I'll volunteer.
All right, thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, item 4, looking for approval or changes to the agenda. Are there any proposed changes to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Yeager.
Yeager. Gorham, second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that passes. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting held on February 17th, 2021.
Move to approve.
Erickson, motion to approve.
Second, Yeager.
Yeager, second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Old business, item 6, none. Item 7, new business. We have a variance and a conditional use permit request from Independent School District 181. Director Chansky, could you set that up for us, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So this is both a variance and a conditional use permit amendment request for Garfield Elementary located at 1120 10th Avenue Northeast. Due to the unique nature of this request, the commission can kind of consider them jointly. However, they will require separate motions for each of them, as it is a variance and a conditional use permit. However, because they do kind of go hand in hand, essentially, you know, you're not going to. The conditional use permit is essentially void. Well, there's no use for the conditional use permit. The variance is not going to be approved, and vice versa. If the conditional use permit is not going to be approved, there's really no point in approving the variance. So we can consider these two items together. However, in your packet, you will see that we did separate them in issues in the findings of fact. So the first before you is the variance. You can see there that Garfield Elementary is in an R1 single-family residential district. The operation of a public school is a conditional use per section 515-54-5.f in residential districts. ISD 181 is proposing an addition of approximately 1,529 square feet to the gymnasium. Garfield is one of the only school, or the only school as part of the referendum and all the additions and remodels that did not originally have a gym component to it. And from my understanding, kind of that project was started to come in under budget, and funds came up to allow them to do this extension of the gym. We did confer with the consultants with ICS who are working with the school district about their gym, and also do some research. What they're looking at doing is having it's approximately 100 by 120 square foot gym. That'll be the total area of the gym. The actual extension is about 24.66 by 62 feet. That's the extension. The total gym will be about 60 by 102, and that will allow them to have a regulation size gym for a middle school or a high school, and then that would allow continuity across all the schools. All the schools would have that size of a gym. So as part of what they are requesting is a variance from the principal building setback requirement in an R1 zone for a front yard of 20 feet. Again, if you look at the site plan, Garfield Elementary does take up a whole block. So they kind of have that 20-foot requirement on all corners because it does take up a whole block. Their side setback from 11th Avenue Northeast does meet the requirement at about 27 feet, 4.5 inches. If you looked at the survey, you might have noticed it looks like their property line runs into the street, and that's because it does. We did confer that also with the city engineer, just to make sure that was right. This survey was done by WSN, which gave me good confidence in the survey, but I just wanted other eyes on it, and the city engineer said that is correct. The north side, which is really looking for this variance, it's along L Street. Again, requirement would be 20 feet. They are asking that the setback be adjusted to allow for a setback of 16 feet, 5 3/4 inches from that property line. Again, section 515-7-2 governs the administration or the allowances for variances, and there are a number of conditions. First, when they can be permitted when they are in harmony with general purpose and intent of the ordinance. Staff, we do believe that this is an intent. This is in harmony. Again, this is a residential area. It does allow for schools. The school's been there for quite some time, is not going away, and we believe that neighborhood elementary schools within walking distance of residents does fit the purpose of an R1 district. Also, they can be permitted when the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff, we do believe that there are 2 sections in Chapter 1 of the comprehensive plan that support this. Policy 1, under Goal 1, it states strengthen and direct development toward existing neighborhoods. So again, we're potentially strengthening that neighborhood by locking that school down in that position. And then Policy 2 under Goal 1 says developing complete neighborhoods that meet the needs of all people with a comfortable walking, bicycling distance. Again, this allows everyone in that neighborhood, that northeast neighborhood, could be able to access a school within walking or cycling distance, and not having to, having the schools have to go out somewhere else and build a new school that they would have to either drive or bus to. Additionally, there are 3 other tests when it comes to permitting variances. One, that the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the ordinance. It is a reasonable manner that they are allowed in the condition. They are a conditional use in R1 districts. What is not being permitted by the ordinance would be the 16-foot, 5 3/4 inch setback. But again, the use is not changing. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstance unique to the property owner, not created by the landowner. This is one that we did take a dive into. It's not a unique property in that, unlike some other properties, maybe there's wetlands or bluffs or other typographical situations that may restrict development. But in this case, we looked at it as is that Garfield Elementary was constructed in 1955. Since 1955, the size of the community has grown, and the addition of the gymnasium will further allow Garfield to adjust to this growth and serve students in Northeast Brainerd for years to come. I know that was the reasoning behind the referendum when it was passed by the voters in ISD, in the school district. Again, the goal was to keep these schools in these neighborhoods. And then finally, the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Again, this is an elementary school and will continue to be used as such. We received a couple different calls from neighbors. Again, the public notice for the public hearing and this variance was sent out. Most often, the request we got was wondering what they're doing, and no one expressed concerns. We are recommending approval of this variance. We do have recommendations regarding conditions, but we're going to save that for the conditional use permit side. Mr. Chair, would you like to have me jump into the conditional use permit, or do you want to stop and just discuss the variance at this time?
Let's do the conditional use permit as well, please.
Okay. Again, jumping into the conditional use permit, some of these facts are the same as stated before. I'll just jump into the criteria as listed in the code for public schools. They list 5, that the site has access to a major collector. The site is landscaped according to Section 20 of the zoning code. Off-street parking is provided in accordance with Section 22 of the zoning code. Off-street loading and service entrances are provided as regulated by Section 23 of the zoning code, and emergency vehicle access is provided to and within the site. On their number 5, under the findings of fact, you'll see that the planning commission originally or approved the last conditional use permit back in November of 2019. It was approved by the city council on December 2nd of 19. This was for the overall remodel. So nothing as part of that remodel is changing. So everything that was approved then is staying as is. There are no other major changes being happened to the previously approved areas. So really what we're looking at this point with this conditional use permit amendment is the gym and the extension of the gym that was not approved in the previous conditional use permit. So that's what we're looking to amend, is to allow the gym to be extended. We do make a recommendation. We are recommending approval for the CUP. The staff does have a recommendation that the planting of at least 2 shade trees of at least 2-inch caliper size between the proposed addition and the sidewalk along L Street. The purpose of this is, again, we're reducing the setback, but put the trees in there will help lessen the visual effects of the proposed building in relation to the sidewalk and the property line in the street. Just kind of, again, instead of feeling there's building right there, at least we have some trees as kind of that visual barrier. So that is the variance and the conditional use permit. Mr. Chair, I'll take any questions the commission has at this time.
Thank you, Director Chansky. Just one clarification. I believe you said that the conditional use permit did not approve, if I can summarize, did not approve a gymnasium. And I think, just for clarification, that was, in maybe repeating what you said elsewhere, that was not included in their original conditional use permit. So it's not that it was not approved, it just was not on the slate of what we handled in December of 2019.
Correct. It just wasn't it wasn't part of the project at that time.
Very good, thank you. Other questions for Director Chansky? All right, hearing none, let's open public hearing on a request for a variance and a conditional use permit at 614. And is the applicant or representative present?
Yeah, we are. Director Duval, this is Reed TC, Director of Buildings and Grounds for Brainerd Schools. Good evening. Good evening, Commissioner members. Yeah, Mr. Chansky summarized it very well. The original intent of the project was to just remodel Garfield Elementary. Bids have come in very favorably for us. We've had great success in our project already, and we kind of had in mind that we would entertain a gym expansion to make this building consistent with the rest of our schools across the district. And we have the opportunity to do so. So we appreciate you guys considering this at this time. This would make us consistent in every single site from Nisswa, Baxter to Brainerd, that all of them would have full-size gymnasiums. And really, we have a lot of programming that goes on in there. When we have that programming there, we do have, really a full house when we have our kids performing. We don't have a dedicated stage in that building, so having this additional space allows us to spread out, set up a stage, have our public in, set up nice chairs, and really have a good performance for the community. So that's really the basis of our request.
Thank you, Mr. Teesing. Any questions for the applicant? Staff? Okay. Are there individuals in the audience that would wish to address this proposal or this variance request? And if so, if you could use *3 on your phone to raise your hand, and we'll recognize you. Is there anyone that wishes to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak on this proposal?
It does look like there's one person, James, who's raised their hand, Mr. Chair. Phone number who's ending in, starts in 703, ends in 91.
All right, if you can
Press *6 to unmute yourself.
*6 to unmute yourself, and please say your name and your address for the record, please.
Yes, you are. This is Jody Kennedy, the principal at Garfield Elementary School, and I just wanted to thank the commissioners for entertaining the option of this variance tonight. We are extremely excited for the opportunity to have a gym expansion. While it was not part of our original packaging, knowing that we have funds available has allowed us to really consider the opportunity to have facilities that would be equitable to the others and also support our family's needs. So I just thank the commission for your time tonight and thank you all.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this proposal or this variance and conditional use permit request? Use star 3 to raise your hand, star 6 to unmute. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Star 3 to raise your hand. Do we have anyone else on there that's identified? All right. All right, well, questions from, again, any questions here for the applicant? Mr. Teese, I do have one question, if I may. Are there state or federal standards that apply to the dimensions or the size of a particular gymnasium in relation to the use that's being proposed?
There are, when we look at this from a athletic Minnesota State High School League standpoint, there are recommended sizes for basketball courts. So, when we have our youth program, when we talk about the Brainerd Basketball Association and then how that is a feeder into our school athletic programs, we like to have those kids practicing on and learning on those full-size courts that we would typically see in our middle schools and high schools. So, yeah, there is a guideline size, Director Duvall, on what those courts would be, and this would allow us to put one of those courts in at Garfield Elementary.
And it is fair to say that the current gymnasium does not meet that standard size to be able to do what you're wanting to do.
That is correct. It's the correct width. So when Mr. Chansky talked about adding the size onto the gym, essentially we're matching the width and we're just extending the building north. We just have a 2/3 court right now, and we really want to extend that out so that we get that full court length.
Very good. All right, thank you. All right, any other questions for staff or for the applicant? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing at 6:18 and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Thoughts?
I have one question for Mr. Chansky, and that would be on the 2 trees. Can we get a kind of image? Is there a way we can sort of look at where the trees that you're recommending on the CUP, where they are? Just out of curiosity.
James, do you want to pull that? And this is a recommendation that actually James brought to my attention. Again, just as from that aesthetics piece of you're pulling the building closer to, that sidewalk and the street, is there a way to kind of lessen that intensity? And that's we put up those trees. And James, if you want to come up and speak to that a little bit, kind of what your thought process there was with that. You're gonna turn that mic on, I think, or is it already on? Okay.
Yeah, so my proposal with that, just because of that extension there, it's going over the setback. You have the height of the gymnasium on that side, just putting 2 trees in that area. Being that this is on the corner as well, I kind of took that into account as well. That way you're able to, the furthest tree to it'd be, I guess, to the east there, but kind of looks north on this map, could be offset from the corner there, and you could place another one 25 to 30 feet to the, I guess, downward area in this one. So that's where I thought 2 trees would be appropriate, and just kind of help lessen the effects of, any height of that gymnasium.
And James, also, can you quick speak just for the benefit of the commission as to why we're not recommending anything on the east side of the building?
Oh, yep, and I did drive by and took a look on the east side, and there really isn't any room there. You can see the sidewalk is right up to it. There's a lot of elevation change on that side as well. So that's where I thought it was only appropriate on that north side to place a couple of trees.
Even even though the property line goes to the center of the street.
That's correct, yep.
You'd be putting in the tree in the sidewalk. I'm not sure Engineer Sandy would be very happy with that.
Challenge course. All right, thank you, Mr. Gronvik. Other questions, discussion on this? Director Jansky, it seems to me that, you know, another supporting finding of fact on the circumstances unique to the property would be the design standards that are required for the facility or the court that they're trying to be able to have here. So might ask that we include that as perhaps another bullet under the plight of a landowner. All right, other than that, hearing no other discussion, looking for a motion first. Let's entertain a motion on approval of the variance.
Mr. Chair, I would like to put forward a motion to approve the variance for the setback to, is it 16 and a half feet they're asking for the expansion of their gymnasium.
Motion by Mr. Foley to approve the variance for the setback. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Woodward, second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, variance is approved. If we can bring forward now the conditional use permit. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, I entertain a motion on the conditional use permit.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to recommend approval of the CUP application with the conditions that are outlined, the planting of the 2 shade trees, 2-inch caliper size between the proposed addition and the sidewalk along L Street Northeast, as well as the findings of facts.
Motion by Mr. Erickson to approve the conditional use permit with the conditions of adding trees as defined or described. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Woodward. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. And the motion carries. David, Mr. Chansky, could you inform the applicant of next steps, please?
Yep, so both the variance and the conditional use permit will go before the city council for formal approval on their April 5th council agenda. So we have about 3 weeks before that meeting. That'll be their next meeting. So on April 5th, both the variance and the conditional use permit will be considered by the council for formal approval.
All right, thank you. And
Thank you very much.
you're quite welcome. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
At this point, we're moving on to item 7B, consideration of amending section 51537, signs of the Code of Ordinances. So, Director Chansky, would you please set this up for us?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So, you can see my memo that was included in the packet. This is a situation, kind of really goes back to January. Currently, the city's sign ordinance states that non-commercial speech signs need to be removed 10 days after an election. And it defines non-commercial speech sign as a sign displaying or disseminating of messages not classified as commercial speech, which include but are not limited to messages concerning political, religious, social, ideological, public service, civic events, and informational topics. The city for the last year, per council direction, has been operating under a complaint-driven form of code enforcement. So, on November 13th, we weren't driving around looking for signs and telling people to remove their signs. However, starting in January, we started to get complaints about signs still being out. Complaint here or there. About the end of January, however, we kind of had a rash of probably about a half a dozen complaints in about 2 or 3 days. And at that point, it was kind of determined that, okay, from our professional ethic, we can't ignore this issue anymore. However, we do recognize, staff to recognize that this is a sensitive topic, and we are brushing up against freedom of speech issues. So we dove into this issue, and as staff, we reviewed it. Okay, what does the ordinance say? We recognized that sending out one-off letters just based off complaints would not be a very equitable form of enforcement, especially in this situation. As how would it look if I receive a letter for my political sign, and then I walk down the street and my neighbor who maybe has a different stance than I do, or voted for a different candidate, still has their sign up. So we conferred with the city administrator as well as the city attorney. This was also brought attention to the city council. And the approach that staff took is we took a couple days and we drove the entire city and took down the addresses of any property that had a sign that fit under this definition. And again, to maintain, trying to be as impartial as possible, we didn't even look up, using GIS or other means to see who the property owners were. We just took down the address. All letters were addressed to current resident, and that's where they were sent. However, and that occurred on February 12th. Following the issuance of these letters, we did dig, we started to get feedback from those who received letters. We started to dig further into the issue of non-commercial speech signs and their regulation. And we did find some concerns regarding the city's regulations and whether or not it could be legally supported. And then upon staff's recommendation, the city council during their March 1st meeting did refer the issue to the planning commission for further review, and directed staff to refrain from any further enforcement until the planning commission returns them an opinion on the city sign ordinance, specifically as it speaks to non-commercial speech signs. Attached in your packet, you have a number of items. The first is a red line draft version of the city's sign ordinance that I worked on. Also worked on it with James. So it's in the hands of the city attorney as well. Really going in through and addressing any situation where it speaks specifically to non-commercial speech signs. Also in your packet is a number of other supporting documents, specifically just non-commercial speech signs. One is an occurring opinion by Associate Justice Samuel Alito in the Supreme Court's case of Reed versus the Town of Gilbert, which was heard and determined in 2015, as well as a document that's guidance from the League of Minnesota Cities on drafting sign ordinances, and it does speak a lot to essentially First Amendment principles and non-commercial speech signs when regulating signs. Also, this pointed out in the ordinance as well, as you'll see in the draft, there are some highlighted sections of the ordinance. There are a couple of different issues I would like to address tonight. First and foremost is the issue of the non-commercial speech elements of the ordinance and getting those resolved. I do believe the council is looking for I don't want to use the word quick, but a timely resolve to those issues. There are some other highlighted elements. Those are elements that, as long as we were looking at the sign ordinance, I would like to have a discussion with the planning commission about them. Those items do not need a determination this evening, but I would like to at least open up that discussion, especially as we look broader and that we are in the middle of our zoning code update. To that extent, I also did speak with Jennifer Haskamp, Wisconsin Haskamp Consulting, just to get her opinion before we jumped into this. Again, we are going through the zoning code update. And her opinion was, again, go ahead, address these issues before a formal amendment is adopted. We would provide it to them, to Jennifer and Mike Lamb for their review, just to ensure, not necessarily did they agree with the language, but to ensure that it wouldn't, again, have any negative effects to the overall update. Last thing we'd want to do is update an ordinance now and then 6 months down the road having to update it again because it somehow doesn't jive with the bigger picture of the ordinance. what I want to do now, Mr. Chair, is just go over essentially some of the basic information when it comes to signs, specifically non-commercial speech. This has been litigated multiple times over the last 50-plus years, but Reed versus the town of Gilbert is kind of the leading case and the most recent case. Again, in this situation, a little background, the petitioners were denied a non-commercial speech sign. They're a church by the town of Gilbert, and then took the town of Gilbert to court. The town of Gilbert had a very, very specific sign ordinances that even called out even specific types of signs, the regulations for those specific types of signs. And really, what the court held is that content-based laws must satisfy strict scrutiny. Reading from Justice Alito's concurring opinion, he said the content-based laws merit this protection because they present, albeit sometimes in a subtler form, the same dangers as laws that regulate speech on a viewpoint. Limiting speech based on topic or subject favors those who do not want to disturb the status quo. Such regulations may interfere with democratic self-government and the search for truth. He goes on to later say, this does not mean, however, that municipalities are powerless to enact and enforce reasonable sign regulations. And he says, I will not attempt to provide anything like a comprehensive list, but here are some rules that would not be content-based. I think he provides a pretty simple list. Again, it's not full. What I gave you with the League of Minnesota Cities kind of goes in a little more extent of the same things. So pretty much what can cities and municipalities regulate? Size of signs, locations of signs, distinguishing between lighted and unlighted, distinguishing between signs with fixed messages or electronic messages or changeable messages, placement of signs on public or private property, distinguishing between the placement of signs on commercial or residential property, distinguishing between on-premise and off-premise signs, restricting the total number of signs allowed per mile roadway. That, again, the per mile roadway could be anything, or it could be even the property. And then rules imposing time restrictions on signs advertising a one-time event. So really it comes down to, you can pretty much touch location, size, number are the basic top three that you can touch. You can't do anything that has to do with content. And the League of Minnesota Cities really kind of goes further into outlining each one of those things. There is one exception to all of this, and that is what they call the election season preemption. That does mean that, according to state law, municipalities must allow non-commercial signs of any size or number during election season, which runs 46 days before the state general primary and 10 days after the state general election. The statute does not define non-commercial speech, does kind of go into that. So pretty much says this municipality can absolutely regulate, again, size, number, location of non-commercial speech signs outside of this election season preemption during that 46 days before the general primary and 10 days after the general election. It's much looser. You know, if you restrict, for example, say you only can have 4 signs, they can have as many signs as they want. They can be as big as they want during that window. Outside of that window, the municipality absolutely has the right to regulate size, number, location, lighted, unlighted. Those physical aspects of the sign. When it comes to content, those things cannot be touched. I will pause for one moment and ask, does the commission have any questions on this at this point before I dive into some of my recommended changes to the ordinance?
Questions for staff?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple. The first one would be, we use the phrase, what was it here? Site visibility triangle. What is a site visibility triangle?
So that's a safety situation, and again, we would be eligible to regulate that. The site visibility triangle is, it really talks about like on a corner lot. So if I'm coming up, the site visibility triangle will be a part where I'm coming up to an intersection, and because there's a sign placed in that, what they call a site visibility triangle, I cannot see the traffic specifically coming from my right. And that would be a safety situation, which again would be, the city does have the right, again, because it's a public, that would meet, I believe, talking about strict scrutiny, especially as a public good, in that we're trying to keep people from crashing into each other in intersections. Other things that I think the League of Minnesota Cities, to the same extent, again, public good, is not allowing people to put essentially a stop sign in their front yard that would then confuse drivers as to, do I have to stop here or not? Things like those signs also can be prohibited from being placed in someone's yard, again, for public safety reasons.
Quick, the next question, is public art a sign? Public art? Maybe that's too big it's too big of a question here, but
I think that would be,
like a mural.
yeah, and that is kind of a question. At what point does something become a sign? You could argue that in different ways. Thinking it's painted on the wall, again, is it disseminating a message? You could argue yes, you could argue no. I guess I'd have to dig further into where public art falls.
Last quick question would be, and this is maybe a little, we don't have to answer this one tonight. Is the city prepared to look at maintenance of signs? I see it's kind of mentioned in the code. There are a couple of egregious examples downtown of signs of businesses that haven't existed for maybe 40 years. And I'm just kind of, and there's still a business in the place, but there's a different sign for another business that's in front of the building.
I think I know we haven't really discussed, I think it's been brought up before, and at least as long as I've been here, of what do we do about what you said, mainly businesses that are no longer in business but still have their sign up. As to the maintenance of signs, I think that would fall under just our property maintenance code, not necessarily the sign ordinance, where if it's dilapidated or things like that, we could have it changed. As to a requirement that the sign face be changed, I haven't really seen, I understand where that's coming from. I haven't seen any examples of that, however, where if you go out of business, you must, remove your sign face or it must be changed within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the city couldn't do that. I just have to research more into that. I just haven't seen anything like
There's
that.
a couple of businesses downtown that, again, there are businesses there, there are active businesses, but the signs advertise another business, which used to exist a long time ago. Just kind of, that was just an opportunity to ask that question. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gorham. Other questions for staff?
Chair?
Mr. Yeager?
I just have one quick question for Mr. Chansky. I hope I'm not getting us off into the weeds here, but I am going to ask this question. When I'm reading the section, the 515.37.5, with the rewriting, with the recommended or the comments in specifically section B, this is the non-commercial speech signs. And then I'm in the permit not required section, Mr. Chansky. Do we intend to differentiate between signs that are placed in a yard versus in windows, stapled to a porch, on a garage door? For instance, do we have wording, and I may have missed this, so if I did, I apologize, but wording that will somehow illustrate differences between viewable versus posted?
So I will answer this two-part. First, generally, I will say the city's approach has been, if it's in the window or inside, we consider that generally inside the structure. I believe, I'd have to double check, there is some language, I think, either in the design standards for the B3 zone about your window can't be just completely a sign. But generally, especially in residential, if someone puts something
R1,
inside the house.
R1 specifically is.
Yes, we generally haven't touched that. It's been kind of more of outside. To your question of, where it's posted, I'm just pulling up the section really quick here. 515-2, again, is the definitions section, and I will bring up what our ordinance currently does not have a generic definition. Oh, actually, there it is. Found it. I thought it did. Definition. So we do have multiple definitions for signs. There is a generic definition for sign, though. It says, any letter, word, or symbol, poster, picture, statutory reading, matter, or representation in the nature of advertisement, announcement, message, or visual communication, whether painted, posted, printed, affixed, or constructed, including all associated brackets, braces, supports, wires, and structures, which is displayed for informational or communicative purposes. Does that
That means
answer your
that if
question?
it's viewable from the window, it counts against potentially one of your two signs. Is that right? Is that what we're saying here?
When you
It's
say
a
view-
sign, right?
When you say viewable from the window, as in inside, are you talking about outside
From the
prop-
road, from the road.
From the
sir.
road, yes.
Okay, that's,
And so in that aspect, again, it's a little less vague. Things that I have read generally say don't recommend calling out flags specifically, but that definition would cover also things like flags. Because people have asked questions. Well, if I take it off my pole and I put it on two posts, is it no longer a flag? And according to our definition, it was a sign either way.
the intent is to include those, right?
Yes.
Okay,
The intent
thank
is to
you.
include flags.
That was-
Again,
that
they
was
are
all, Mr.
disseminating a message of some
Thank you.
kind.
That's all, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other questions for the director? So David, hearing no other additional questions, are you intending to step us through the proposed language changes here? We've jumped into that, so.
Yep, I can absolutely. That would be the next step here. Again,
Please
just
do
wanting
that.
to go first, just through the focus first on the non-commercial speech sections. So there are a couple of things. The city attorney did point me to the city of Hopkins. The city of Hopkins has their sign ordinance has been relatively litigated, and by the League of Minnesota Cities is actually considered an exemplary sign ordinance. Thankfully, some of the things many of the things we're already proposing were already covered in Hopkins, so I felt good about that. Some of the language actually in our code was also in our current code was actually also in the Hopkins code, which was comforting. One of the things I am pulled directly out of their code, which I think it was very good that they put this in there. It's a recommendation I'm making is a finding section at the beginning of it, because I think it really sets up kind of what the sign ordinance is here to do, and then just makes some findings, some observations right away. And they just do it as the city council. Again, the city council would be the one who would be adopting these ordinances. That exterior signs have a substantial impact on the character and quality of the environment. Signs provide an important medium through which individuals may convey a variety of messages. Signs can create traffic hazards, aesthetic concerns, detriments to property values, thereby threatening the public health, safety, and welfare. I put in here, this is the part that I actually added, was the definition of the sign that I read earlier. Again, just getting it out in, it is referred to in section 515-2, but I think it's helpful to have it in the code. So if someone's looking at a sign ordinance, they're not having to go to another section of code to find the definition of sign. It is right here for you. And then just general language here of that the city's zoning regulations have included the regulation of signs in an effort to provide adequate means of expression to promote the economic vitality of business community while protecting the city and its citizens from proliferation of signs of type, size, location, and character that would adversely impact upon the aesthetics of the community and threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the community. The regulation of physical characteristics of signs within the city has a positive impact on traffic safety and appearance of the community. Again, calling out the characteristics. That is one area of just looking. I thought it would be good to add, just to call that out again, make it clear that the sign ordinance is specifically calling out characteristics, but there's a greater purpose to the sign ordinance. We're not necessarily looking to regulate people's speech, but we're also looking out for the safety and aesthetics and vitality of our community, and signs can have a negative impact. The section, the purpose and intent, left as it is, just renumbered it because we added that one section at top. Effect, 37-2 was fine, 37-3 fine, 37-4 fine. It was 37-5 where we started to get in the permit not required into some gray areas. As you can see, the existing C, this is the one that got us in hot water. If you want to scroll down, James, one more, there we go. I've recommended complete removal of the existing C language. Again, the concern here is that we are specifically, the way you read it is it's saying outside of essentially the election preemption, you can't have signs. That's kind of essentially how it is written at this time. So with that being said, we've just recommended being that removed, removing point E, official signs, point F, flags and emblems, and then point G. The reason I'm recommending E, F, and G removed, and I have that comment in there, is because one of the things I have read in League of Minnesota Cities and in court cases is beyond regulating non-commercial, what goes on a non-commercial speech sign, you also can't, your ordinance can't favor commercial speech over non-commercial speech. And that's essentially what we are doing here. We're actually even favoring with official signs, flags, and emblems of national, federal, or state governments or memorial signs. We're actually favoring specific types of non-commercial speech over others. So that even digs it even further. We can't be doing that. We can't say you can have a Minnesota flag or American flag, but not a Vikings flag or a Twins flag or, you know, pick your alma mater. We can't be saying that. And then with G, again, what this was actually allowing was, these are your real estate signs. Again, now we're actually giving, it's a commercial use for the sign, and now we're giving it special treatment, and we can't be doing that either. So I recommended removal of all those. What I did do, however, was create a new B, and this is, my goal is to address the non-commercial speech sign issue with this new section B. What it says is they are not permitted, again, permit not required, non-commercial speech signs subject to the following. The sign shall be located on private property with permission of the property owner. Again, private property. The permission of the property owner is if you are, you know, it's a campaign sign or something, it's your sign, and you have to get, you want to put it on someone else's property, it can go on their property, but you have to get the property owner's permission. No sign shall be located in the right-of-way. The city absolutely does have the right to deny signs being put in the right-of-way and then removing them should they be put in the right-of-way. And then staff would recommend, again, continuing that be the case. It goes the same for public property as well. Anything that the city allows in the public, the right-of-way or on public property, once you allow one thing, you kind of have to allow everything. Your restrictions on public property, once you start allowing things, go away really quickly. If you allow one person, if you want to disallow another person, you have to have really good reason why you're going to not allow another person to put something on public property or the public right-of-way. So general recommendation is just don't allow anything in the public property or public right-of-way. Sign shall be placed no less than 15 feet back from the curb and shall not be within the site visibility triangle. Spoke to that reason of the visibility triangle. The 15 feet from the curb, the city engineer and I actually made that recommendation and got the ordinance changed last fall. And the reason was prior to this, it actually said under the old non-commercial speech sign, talked about, again, have you on your property. The problem is in certain areas of our community, people aren't quite sure. It can even vary block to block where their property line ends and the right-of-way begins. So recommendation was if you stay 15 feet back from the curb, in 98% of cases, that'll get people onto their private property. And then again, further off farther away from the right-of-way and sidewalks and things like that. Signs shall not exceed 6 square feet in area and shall not exceed 3 feet in height. Again, we're controlling the aesthetics of the sign. I have seen 6 square feet. That's actually the same size that I believe the Hopkins ordinance has is 6 square feet. In how, again, just kind of visualize, that'd be like a 2 by 1.5. And that's generally most lawn signs are about that 6 square feet. And then 3 feet tall is our recommendation. I think that's about here. trying to keep those short and not, someone's putting up a giant sign in their yard. Again, the election preemption would supersede this. So it would be this most days of the year. However, in that preemption period, that would supersede the requirement. Signs could be bigger than 6 square feet, and they could be taller than 3 feet. However, again, it doesn't supersede the visibility triangle situation. We do at this time are recommending no more than 2 signs per property. Again, we can regulate the number. The idea there again was talking to what was pointed out in that finding section about aesthetics. Do we want someone to have a yard full of signs? We are still allowing them to have signs. We're still allowing them to express their speech, but we're just restricting a number. And that is something, again, we just put 2 in there. The commission may say or recommend that we do not put a limit, or you could change the limit. Under that number, that's where I placed the election preemption. We have to have that in there. I'm also recommending that signs not be illuminated. Again, most of these signs are going to be in residential areas, and we've talked a lot about lighting, and I think it would be in the city's best interest to make sure that these signs are not illuminated. Specifically at night, again, thinking that these can be mostly in residential areas. And then on C, we talked that this is temporary off-premise signs. Again, 6 square feet and less shall not exceed 3 feet in height. That actually was already in there. And then temporary signs be allowed for a period of 7 days. Again, temporary off-premise sign, that would be in a residential area. You could think of, for example, if you're gonna have a yard sale, a sign that's not on your property, but it's pointing to your yard sale or announcing your yard sale and going 1 block over, that would be considered a temporary off-premises sign, and we'd allow those for 7 days. And those are really pretty much all the changes that I found that needed to be made in relation to the non-commercial speech issue. And Mr. Chair, I'll take any questions that the commission has at this point.
Questions of clarification or further understanding for staff?
Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
Mr. Erickson.
About illumination, so if, I agree we want to limit that illumination, so I generally agree, but I guess the question of how would you handle it if there's a sign on a property and there's landscaping lights shining against the house? Would that?
I think in that situation, we look at what was the situation. If there was already lighting, it doesn't saying you can't have lighting on your property. If they stick the sign in front of the lighting that they use to light up their property, then that's something they just took advantage of that. But this lighting the purpose of the lighting wasn't to light up the sign. There have been some signs I have seen in the community where they have specifically put in temporary lighting to light up their sign. Under this ordinance, under this definition, yes.
So if I got my American flag and then the state of Minnesota flag,
And that's where, again, we're looking for kind of that guidance from the commission regarding that. You could also go in here and say excluding flags, or, again, how much you want to get into that minutia of specific types. But again, that's what we were looking for, is as it is written right now, then yes. 2 flag, if you had, your American flag and your alma mater flag, then you would be done.
and then, last question, if I could, the temporary signs you mentioned, how are those obtained? By permit?
So there are, yes, so you're talking about the temporary off-premise signs or other regular temporary signs? So there is if you,
Garage sale.
yep. Most of the time, in this ordinance, I would say that those would be, kind of fall under, generally, what you would want is, that falls under, where is that? Our ordinance talks about portable signs. And As to a garage sign, you could make that you could make a case that that requires a permit, but again, they're temporary. So in that situation, we probably wouldn't, we generally haven't worried about those. I don't think in the 2 years I've been here, I've ever gotten a complaint about a garage sale sign.
Okay, so somebody could, you got the flag and then a yard sign, and you could put up a garage sale sign if you really decide to.
That's how I would
Okay,
understand it.
okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is regarding temporary off-premises signs also. The 7-day period, when does that begin and end? I have seen some examples of garage sale signs that seem to go up for about 3 months straight. So if it's up for 7 days, how long does it have to come down before they get a new 7 days?
So our ordinance currently doesn't define that.
Okay.
Others have. I did look at some of our neighbors. Some of our neighboring municipalities have their ordinances, have some of the issues our ordinances do. But looking past those issues, for example, Pequot Lakes actually talks about, they actually says each parcel shall be allowed up to 14 days during any 90-day period. Temporary signs, including banners, streamers, and portable signs for special events such as grand openings, promotions, provided they meet the following. They actually, in their ordinance, have a cumulative area, so they kind of like our commercial signs. They say, based off of your property, you have X amount of total square feet. How you choose to spread that out is up to you. But they say no more than 4 temporary signs shall be displayed at any given time. And again, there's really coming to your question, talks about 14 days in a 90-day given period. Okay. Our ordinance is pretty much silent on that. So in theory, our ordinance says as long as it's gone for 1 day, you can allow another 7.
Right. So you don't like the idea of the chalk mark on them when just like parking? Mark the tire.
How it to an enforcement perspective and on how the ordinance is currently written, if someone complained about a sign, again, we go out there and we document it, and then we go out 7 days later and see if it's still there. Right. That's really when our 7 days would start. You know, someone say, well, it's been there for 30. Well, I can't prove that, so I kind of have to start over.
Right, understood.
Additional questions for staff for clarification before we move to public hearing? All right, hearing none, we're going to open public hearing.
And Mr. Chair, before we go to the public hearing, I just want to clarify, does the commission care to look at the other things first, or just want to take care of the non-commercial speech signs first, get that out of the way, and then dig into the other topics? As long as we make some action or comments on these by the end of this evening, is my goal. But if you would like to, it's up to you.
Let me hear your thoughts on these other ones before we go to public hearing.
You want to do that?
Yep.
Okay.
We can take input on that as well.
Yep. Again, these are areas that I'm not necessarily looking for direct opinion or adoption of them this evening. I just want to open up the discussion while we were looking at the sign ordinance, and these are things that maybe we can have further discussion as we go through the zoning code update. There's 2 main ones. Also, you'll see under 5153.7-6, I did remove section C there only because I felt like that was unnecessary if we're already calling out off-premise signs and regulating them elsewhere. I thought it was kind of redundant. Anyway, what I've seen throughout this ordinance is a focus on changeable copy signs. Again, I don't know all the history, if there was some history or issues with changeable copy signs in the past. It seems like we want to be restricting them. Again, in 37- what did I go? In 37-6, it talks about changeable copy signs are prohibited, except that specifically in 37-10. So if you go down to 37-10, where am I? I thought I highlighted that. There we go. All the way down to section, C6. Talks about changeable copy signage. in commercial areas. This is a commercial district standard. And then there's also changeable copy signs down under D under multiple, again, commercial. I guess the question I had for the commission is there a concern about changeable copy, or would we not? I guess my question is, would we not want someone, if as long as it met the regulations in a residential, 6 square feet and no more than 3 feet in height, would we say you can't have a changeable copy sign there? Or in other places, would we say you can't have a changeable? Is there a concern with changeable copy signs, I guess is my question. Looking at the code, I'm not quite getting why those things are so specifically called out.
Could you define changeable?
Yep, and I'll actually I can pull up the actual definition from the ordinance. There's actually 3 definitions of changeable copy sign in the ordinance: electric, manual, and graphic. But essentially, I'll start with the same thing: a sign or portion thereof that has a reader board for the display of text information in which the alphanumeric character, graphic, or symbol is defined by objects not consisting of an illumination device. That's manual, and may be changed or rearranged manually or mechanically with characters, illustration, letters, or numbers that can be changed or rearranged without altering the face or surface of the sign structure. And then it defines manual, electric, and graphic, but they all come to that same thing of something you can change or rearrange the surface without changing the structure of the sign. So really, I guess my question is there any reason to prohibit them outside of what's already allowed in the ordinance?
Mr. Krombeck, do we have a number of people online with us?
We have one person still on.
You know, I think if we're going to evolve into a discussion of these things, I'm thinking we might want to do the public hearing piece. Do you imagine your other items are going to have discussion and feedback like this? Is that kind of how you intend to step through these?
Yeah, with these ones, again, these are more of trying to get a feel of where the commission's at, and if they want to have further discussion down the road. Again, I would see that more as part of the greater, not necessarily looking that these items would be items that would go before the council in the near future for amendment.
You know,
Does that make sense?
think, Director Chansky, I think we should move to the public hearing piece at this point, and then let's pick these up after discussion, if we can.
Sounds good to me, Mr. Chair.
So thank you for being willing to put that aside for this moment in time. And are there any other questions of staff before we move to public hearing? Hearing none, let's open the public hearing 7:03. And if there are individuals who wish to speak on behalf of the ordinance before us, you press #3 to raise your hand and #6 to
Star
unmute.
3.
Excuse me, *3 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Is there anyone wishing to speak on behalf or speak on this ordinance revision before us? And again, you would press *3 for raising your hand, *6 to unmute. And going once.
Yep, we have a hand, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Well, then we're going to close the public.
Oh, we do have, the person did raise their
They
hand.
did. Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, if you would state your name, please, and your address for the record.
The person who's, yep, there we go.
Hi, Dolly Matten with the Greater Lakes Association, but my address is 1730 Graydon Avenue, Brainerd, Minnesota. I was just wondering if you could clarify the real estate signs again, only because we know we've had issues with them in the past, and I know we don't want to continue to have issues going forward. And in a market where it's really hot, I don't see that being an issue right now, but in the future, that should change. I know signs become an issue. So I just would like for you to elaborate on when you talked about that section. I guess it was a little unclear as to what change you were looking at making.
Thank you. David, could you address that?
Yep. So in this situation, Dolly, what I am seeing is that it would fall under, and maybe we need to make a little clarification of that. It would fall under the general, not permit required, when it talks about, not exceeding 6 square feet of area, 3 feet in height. And I will say this was something that actually, I know James and I discussed a little bit, is how do they relate to, real estate signs. Again, we want to make sure that we're not, again, negatively affecting real estate signs, but at the same time, trying to massage the ordinance in a way that it doesn't seem like we're giving them preference like our current ordinance does. I guess so. My question would be for you, Dolly. Does a sign that is about 6 square feet in area and 3 feet in height, does that hinder the agents you represent? Or would that be okay?
No, because those would usually fall in the commercial, which would not typically be in the residential. I think where the issue was, and maybe you corrected it in the last year, the 15 feet back from the curbside maybe answers that question or defines it, because I know that oftentimes they do get moved right up darn near to the sidewalks or right into the road right away. And I think that's where when the last push from the city, the last 2 pushes to clean up signs after, maybe an election year, it seemed like more than half of them ended up being real estate signs. So I just wanted to be really clear so we could be very clear with our realtors as to, the very distinct directions on where they can place their signs on property.
Yeah, to that point, Dolly. Yeah, the 15 feet back, and that was the goal when Engineer Paul Sandy and I looked at that. Again, how do we help people to ensure things aren't in the right of way, help them understand? But that's where we felt that, saying 15 feet back from the curb was easy for someone to pace out, and then 98% of the time it won't be a problem because they'll be far enough back that they'll be on the private property.
Perfect. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on the ordinance that's before us tonight? I guess that's us anyway. All righty. With that, I'm going to call the hearing to a close, 7:08, and bring that back to discussion. So is there any discussions or questions or additions regarding the items that we heard from David? This would be the blue insert, red strikeout information.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You may.
The one thing I think I would like to get maybe just a further opinion from the commission on is on that main B, where it says non-commercial speech signs subject to the following. Do we want to keep it specific to the non-commercial speech sign, or would it be more efficient to just say speech signs? I'm just curious to get what the commission thinks about that. Or whatever, not to say speech signs, just to say signs. That would control everything. That they say anything that falls into this doesn't need a permit. Anything more than this would require a permit. Or do we want to specifically just keep it to the non-commercial speech signs here? I've seen it both ways.
Reflections on David's question? Mr. Erickson.
I guess if there's a sensitivity to ensure that we're not favoring commercial versus commercial, you may want to take it out. Would be my thought. And you've referenced that several times, so perhaps there is a sensitivity, if we're wanting to be sensitive to that.
To that point, I will point out also into what Ms. Mattins had comments are, kind of again, this is where that minutia between, say, a person's campaign sign versus a real estate sign comes into play. Where if we say speech, or I mean, not say speech, if we just say signs subject to the following, that would include all real estate signs would have to fall into this section. If we say non-commercial speech, real estate signs wouldn't necessarily have to conform to this section. If that makes sense, because those would be considered commercial speech signs.
Mr. Chansky, the height that you're proposing of 3 feet is for the sign and not for the brackets that hold the sign? Is that your intent? Or are you intending it to be no higher than 3 feet off the ground? Or are you saying that a 6 square foot sign and you can have it at whatever elevation? What's your intent on the 3
So
foot?
in that situation, be kind of going back to how we also look at our commercial signs in the same manner, in which we'd be saying the very top of the sign in relation to grade. So if you had for example, I'll use this example, if you had a 2 by 1.5 sign, and say it's 2 feet tall by 1.5 wide, you could then essentially have a foot of space between the bottom of that sign and grade, if that makes sense. If the sign is 2 feet tall, you can have a foot underneath that. If that
So
makes
is
sense.
your intention then that that's above grade?
Yes. And that's how we do measure all commercial signs as well.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Yeager?
So that would be, so just thinking of real estate signs, the type that go into the ground with 2 little spikes work with that. The one with the big post and the arm that hangs out clearly does not work with that 3 foot, right?
Yep. And that's where, again, staff, what we're looking for, again, is to help us kind of massage, especially I would say that piece and the number piece, to really figure out, is that what the commission wants? Is 6 square feet, 3 feet above grade what you want? Or do you think you should allow bigger or taller? And how do you feel about number? Those, I think, are my main questions of this section.
And I think the example was, what's the, Hopkins you said is the model ordinance that we're using here? Or I guess so, borrowing from it, but if you put 2, I may be motivated to then use as big a sign as I'm allowed in order to be able to communicate my message. If you go with square foot area, cumulative area that I'm allowed, then I might think differently, and so I may have more small signs. So each drives a different part of that equation. You know, if you limit the number, you're going to probably push the upper limit of the size of the signs that will be there. If you limit the square footage, then you're probably going to push the number of signs. I'll end up with the Burma shave thing going. You know?
And to your point of that, Mr. Chair, that is similar to the language we currently have in our commercial sections. Specifically, when we look at pylon signs, it talks about, it gives a maximum size, and then it gives exemptions of, well, if you have more than 300 feet of road frontage, you get an additional square foot per additional foot above 300. And then it gives, again, it kind of maxes that out. And then if you get above, actually I think it's above 100 feet. And then if you have more than 300 feet, then they even allow an additional sign. So there is some precedent to that kind of thought of, we're going to regulate total sign square area. Similar, again, commercial signs are wall signs. We say 15% of the face of the wall. So there is precedent there. When it comes to, again, being consistent and fair when it comes to residential, I don't know if we'd want to go that way of saying, because then you would essentially be giving people that, have a 10-acre lot and they got 300 feet of frontage. Well, if you're doing it based off of that person can have 20 signs. And granted, if they're that big of a lot, they're probably more in a rural area versus someone that's, in town. But again, is that what we want to be doing? Or do we just want to say everyone gets, if you're going to go square foot wise, everyone gets 50 square feet, you divide that as you see fit?
There's trying Trying to recover the phrase that was used.
I will say, if I may, Mr. Chair, from an enforcement perspective, that becomes much more difficult. If we have like complaints, because then we have to figure out, okay, how big are each of their signs? Are they maxing their total square foot area? Then we're having to go on to private property and measure them. And generally, from an enforcement perspective, we do our best to stay off private property at when possible. We try to stay away from stepping foot on private property.
So to the point of, I think what I'm hearing you say is that there's an opportunity to try and structure some balance here, based on maybe the size of your lot or the frontage maybe of how you want to display. In 37.2 effect, that's part C, we're saying, where the communication can be accomplished by means of having a lesser impact on the environment, public safety, public health, welfare. And I'm more, it seems like we'd be more comfortable going down and thinking about it along that lines of can you name that tune in 3 notes versus,
Yep, and
more
again,
than a couple of bars.
that's where we're really looking at, again, things like signs and even the visibility triangle, or someone trying to put a street sign, a stop sign, a yield sign or something in their yard that could be a hazard. That's what I think we're trying to cover there. Again, we want to try to avoid at all possible looking at exactly what is on someone's sign.
So other questions or other thoughts on the ordinance as a whole? We can go into more stuff, or if you get some reactions on what we talked about so far. Mr. Erickson.
I got another comment just about the setback. So in the new section B, 2 and 3, I was wondering if there's a possibility, I could potentially see somebody getting confused. No sign shall be permitted in the right of way, and then reading number 3 and saying, well, which is it? So I wonder, I might propose, could those be combined? You could say, sign shall be placed no less than 15 feet from the back of the curb or within the right of way, whichever is farther. And I'm just trying to head off somebody seeing that, reading that, and questioning whether it's.
That's something that's definitely possible. I know we have other examples in the code where it talks about it's this or this, whichever is less.
Yeah, and if there's
or
if there's a good reason to keep it this way, it's not a big deal. But just for clarification, I think that might help.
I think we definitely want to keep the clarification of not in the right of way, because again, that just further protects the city, and the city does have, according to the ordinance, the authority to remove anything that is in the right of way. That's not allowed to be or permitted to be in the right of way. So we definitely want to make sure we're calling that out. But I could definitely see clarifying this and putting them into one.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting taking the right of way piece out, but
just
combining them and saying
streamlining it.
whichever would be farther.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Other comments, input, reactions?
Chair, just a couple thoughts. There's part of me that looks at this and just says, just throw it all out. This is just Byzantine that we've created here. And okay, that's not going to happen. So if that's not going to happen, how can we make this so simple? Simplicity is our only hope here, and that's why when I hear a square footage, my eyes just glaze over. And number of signs, it's got to be number of signs. If you're going to do anything, it's got to be number of signs. It has to be so simple. It has to be 15 foot from the curb. And I appreciate where you're going there with Tad on the, in terms of the whether if it's 15 feet or what's closest. Again, simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. So that's my feeling on this. Whatever we can do to strip this thing down and make it simple, so anybody can communicate it.
I absolutely agree.
Are you suggesting no square footage limitation then?
Well, I'm not, but I'm just trying to somehow or another get to simplicity here. And if somebody can help me say that in a more eloquent, less irritated way.
Right. Totally understood. I guess what I was thinking is, if you limit the number and you don't limit the square footage, you can put up a 4x8 sheet of plywood in your yard and,
Yeah. Well,
that there. I'm all for simplifying this as well.
Yeah.
Guys. We're all here, we know why we're all here. This wasn't brought on by garage sale signs, quite frankly. I mean, we're all here because of, because of the politically charged signs that are in the yards. And I think we're going the right direction in removing content. I think, I can't speak for the entire board, but I'm not sure that there's anyone here who wants to navigate content. So I think we can strip it down hypothetically as a group to just how many, how big,
there we go.
right? At least that's my thinking anyways. We haven't talked about New York Yankee flags, but I would like to at least consider a 100% ban on anything, but side note. Anyways,
Don't make me gamble you.
If I heard you correctly though, Mr. Chansky, you were asking us specifically to comment on the non-commercial speech signs, correct?
Yes.
Could you give me could you just for my sake, because give me like the high level, 2 pros and 2 cons of leaving it out or taking it in? Is that something you could do?
Yep. And that's something we looked at. And I will say, to Commissioner Gorham, to your perspective, one of the things I did look at was trying to figure out how do we make this as simple as possible while also making it clear. One of the things I saw in ordinance after ordinance that bugged me is they never specifically called out that, yes, you can have signs. So it left it for the reader to be like, okay, it's very ordinance-y to say, here are all the things you can't have, and then you have to determine what I can't have. Mm-hmm. So it was, one of the goals was to straight out say, you can have these. And then, but with some bounds. So the pros of this, again, I would say one of the biggest ones, specifically when I'm looking at numbers, well, let's look all of them under that section, is what we're saying is you can have them. We don't care what they say, excluding the explicit content, which is defined by state statute. But, again, it needs to be on your property. If you're going to try to place them on someone else's property, you need their permission. For example, I could take that as someone. One example that would be is if you're campaigning for office and you're saying, hey, can I put this in your property? Yes, you need that person's permission. That they need to be out of the right of way. An easy way to determine that is just saying no less than 15 feet back from the curb. I agree with Commissioner Erickson, and you can combine those 2 into 1. The idea with 6 square feet pro there is, again, you're not getting someone putting up that 4x8 piece of cardboard, plywood, or whatever. There is a sign in our community that I can think of that is that. I believe it's about 5x8 in someone's yard. And then again, the limiting of the number benefit there is, again, looking at the aesthetics of our community. We're allowing you to have them, but we want it to be tasteful in that there's only a few. We're not saying put up a sign for every one of your 50 causes in your front yard. And then again, the illuminating thing, saying we need you to be respectful of your neighbors and not illuminating your signs at night and keeping them up at night. The cons, it's government regulation.
Excuse me?
It's government regulation. That's the number one con. The number one con is we're still telling people that they have to go in and look at, it has to be a certain size, and we have to then enforce if someone complains or if there's an issue. If there's a sign that is a 5x8, I have to write them a letter and say it needs to be removed. And if it's not removed, you're going to start receiving $100 citations. There is that concern. With number, again, we kind of talked about before, if we're not defining or calling out specifically, which I don't recommend, differences between flags and signs, you are saying, well, you want your American flag and your alma mater flag, that's great. You get nothing else then. And what if I do have a number of great causes that I'm passionate about? It kind of goes back to even what Justice Alito said about regulations that limit speech on topic or subject favor those who do not want to disturb the status quo, and such regulations may interfere with democratic self-governance in search for the truth. Well, again, while in this situation we're not governing type or location, we are saying, you got to pick what top issue is most important to you. So that could be another con.
Thank you. So I'd just like to state my position, if I could, just real quickly. This section B, 1 through 6, feels about right to me, at least to start. Obviously, this is something we can revisit, but it feels about right to me. I believe that the con of government regulation, we're all here because we believe at least in some form of government regulation, and or regulation over property or what our city should look like. So I believe that's our job. And my position is I feel like this is about right as a starting point. So that's where I'm at, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Ms. Woodward?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm having trouble with the 2 signs limit. I think 3 does sound a little more reasonable when you look at, 3 flags can still be tastefully displayed, 3, or a flag and a yard sign, something like that. So I'm still on the fence between whether 2 or 3 is a good number.
Thank you, Ms. Woodward.
That's all I've got. I don't have a lot more to add about. I appreciate that a lot of the lots are smaller, and 2 yard signs fills up a small lot. So it's hard to say some lots are bigger and 3 would be a more adequate number, but at the same time, I think 3 would be a decent number as well.
I have a quick question, Mr. Chair. I might be missing something here,
Sure.
but we see our signs that they should not be 6 square feet. And I think we're saying that flags are signs, correct?
Correct.
Are flags signs or flags are signs? And so then I can't have my flag more than 3 feet above the ground? Am I missing something?
That gets you in trouble with flags, is what you're saying.
Yes, so most people are going to have their flags higher than 3 feet.
In that situation, I think it would be appropriate where you could say excluding flags upon a pole.
Okay.
I believe, I'd have to double check, I think in our lots, that we do talk about heights of poles. Yeah.
Okay, how about flags attached to a house?
Mr. Chair,
Derek,
just a
yeah.
clarification, like on a pole affixed to the house or
Yes,
an
yes.
angle? Yeah,
I can see that as well.
yeah.
And so do they have to be less than 3 feet, or they can be anywhere you want on your house?
And that's where again, why we have that heat brought this up is because of things like that, pointing this out. How we could adjust that, we could adjust that by saying accepting flags upon a pole or flags, signs and flags of, I would say flags upon a pole, or affixed to the house are exempt, or you could just be specifically saying ground mounted.
Okay,
At that point, I would say anything that is not, if it's a flag on a pole, I would say the pole is mounted to the ground, not necessarily the flag. And then if it's affixed to the house, obviously it's not ground mounted. Saying ground mounted, I think might be the easiest way to do it without then people are thinking all these exemptions. Just saying anything, ground mounted signs shall not exceed 6 square feet in area and shall not exceed 3 feet in height. If we said it that way, your flag might not be, you could have a 4 by 8 flag if you wanted, or things attached to the house could be larger. If you specifically said ground mounted signs. And it could be the same thing with number as well. You could say no more than 2 ground mounted signs allowed per property. That would allow you to have a flag pole or a flag affixed to your house, in addition to your 2 signs in your yard.
can I run a sign up my flagpole?
very rigid sign,
Exactly.
very rigid flag.
I don't know, just being hypothetical here.
Very good. Other
Thank you.
other comments or questions for staff? Mr. Erickson?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll just weigh in as well. So that was a concern of mine. If we go that route by saying the ground mounted versus other, would we then need to limit the number of flags then? And I know we're trying to not separate that too much, but.
You could, although I think I'd have to double check, looking at our lots and yard provisions. You know, I would say in general, if it's a pole, if you have, isn't much difference if you have 2 flags versus 4 flags, 1 flag. I don't think so. You know, there's that minutia of, with any ordinance, there's gonna be a gray area and people are gonna find a ways to fit into that gray area. I think here, our goal is to cover as much as we can, and there will be that 2% that find the gray area and exploit the gray area.
And if I could follow up on that too, again, I agree. I think
Not me. Everyone's looking at me.
I agree. I think where we're at here is we're really close, or we're maybe even right on. I do agree with Commissioner Woodward. Like I was leaning towards 3. I'm thinking of the scenario, the 2 flags and then a yard sign. To me, that's about appropriate. 2 seems a little restrictive to me, given that we're including flags in the definition. Now, if we do something different, as you've kind of proposed or maybe suggested, then that might change it. But that's generally where I'm at.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. If I could move us, David, to E, official signs. I'm trying to think of examples of official signs, but it strikes me that we may want to retain official signs in the ordinance. Particularly, it's called out in the Supreme Court opinion about relegating government entities may also erect their own signs consistent with the principles that allow governmental speech. And so I'm trying to figure out why we would remove official signs from our ordinance. Does that effectively limit our voice as government communicating to our citizens?
We could leave that. What it states here under official sign, says signs of a public non-commercial nature, including public notification signs, safety signs, traffic signs, erected by on behalf of a public official or employee in the performance of official duty. Yeah, we could keep that in there.
It feels like we should. It feels like we should. So what I'm hearing, if I can summarize, is I think there's general support for the crafted language you have in B with some suggested modifications of that to add clarity and simplification. And you've taken good notes on that,
Yep.
I'm assured. So is there any other discussion or guidance to staff on item B?
I apologize,
Erickson,
but yeah,
yep.
I have one more question. And am I missing something in 4? What's the average size of a flag?
3 by 5.
So does this then preclude that? Because it's saying 6 square feet, and that would be,
And that's where I think that I have in my notes, is if we change it to specific, to say ground mounted,
okay.
then we'd be precluded. So, Mr. Chair, if I may just reiterate my notes to make sure I'm on par with what the commission has discussed at this point.
Say that again, please,
If I can
David.
just
I'm sorry.
reiterate the notes I have made, just so I make sure that I have understood what the commission has discussed to this point. Is under B, it's to say, to combine, figure out a way to combine sections points 2 and 3, to the effect that signs shall be placed, no less than 15 feet back from the curb. And I would say, thinking about this, I would say and shall not be placed in the right of way. Here's why I said that, because I don't want to know whichever one is greater, because in theory, we don't want someone to be 15 feet back and still in the right of way. Why, that's very slim. Yeah. So I would say and then still, so because combine 2 and 3. And then change 4 to say ground-mounted signs shall not exceed 6 square feet in area and exceed 3 feet in height. And 5 to say no more than 2 ground-mounted signs per property. I have a note here of changing, is the commission in support of changing it from 2 to 3? I've heard 2 of you discuss that number. Is there general support for increasing it to 3 over 2?
My purpose for increasing it to 3 was to allow flags and ground mounted, and if we're limiting to ground mounted signs, I think that then you can tastefully display 2 ground mounted signs and still have a flag of your choice.
As well as anything on if it's coming off your house.
Lauren, you feel comfortable with
Generally
that?
with flags.
Your body language is speaking for recognition, so go.
You know, learn how to shut up.
Simplifying things enough.
I kind of like to, but again, I'm not going to go to the mat and fight on this. I don't know. Yeah, other thoughts on it?
I guess where I'm at is, once the discussion turned towards a combination of flags and ground mounted, I do see a difference there. If it were me personally, I would say 1 ground mounted, and then you still get your 2 flags, but I'm not gonna die on the mountain on this one either. So if the group feels pretty strongly that 2 ground mounted is the right number, if I heard correctly, 2 ground mounted plus your flag, I'm probably fine with that. My personal opinion would be 1 plus flags, but.
And I would just reiterate that obviously the election preemption still exists.
Correct.
So during that 46 days before the primary, 10 days after the election, you can have as many additional signs to those 2 that you so choose.
Pink flamingos and all, right? Okay, continue on, David.
I just wanted to see if Mr. Commissioner Foley had any other comments. I think there's the only one who hadn't spoken at this point.
I'm hung up on the right of way. Can we require a professional survey and a certificate of survey for any sign?
There are houses in Brainerd where they may have a 30-foot front yard, but the right of way literally is 5 foot in front of their porch. So you have one. The south side of Bluff, a big chunk of it is that way. So that definitely is a fact.
And that where again comes to Ms. Matten's comment in the public hearing of
Right.
that's the issue they've had, is where people, that's where the city engineer and I kind of came up with that 15 feet back, is because we had, there have been issues where people, because some people, their property line is 5 feet from the curb, other people's property line is, a full 66-foot right of way where it is that 15 feet. If we say 15 feet, not gathers, 98 to 99% of people would, they paced off 15 feet and placed their sign, they would be on their property.
So can number 2 just be removed? Because obviously if you're, right?
They could be. Because I believe under prohibited signs,
I think
we ought to talk about,
Like
No,
boulevards,
number
garage
two's-
sale signs and boulevards, that would capture the right of way. That's
number 2 is more important than number 3 there, in my opinion.
and I think what we're getting at is number 3 is again that simplification of helping people understand. Because we say right of way, well, that covers us. Again, it goes back to the issue we've had where people don't understand where the right of way is, or some people actually don't understand that the boulevard in front of their house is right of way. Even though it's their duty to maintain it, they don't understand that that is the right of way. So if you have, your front yard, a sidewalk, and then green space, that's the right of way, and you can't put a sign in that green space. And I think that's what, again, Ms. Madden was talking about, is people have done that. And that's where we come through, and the city comes through and grabs all those signs up. And if we say 15 feet back, it's an easy way for people to be like, okay, I need to pace off 15 feet, and then I can drop it. And again, there's also that aspect of even if someone only has 5 feet of right of way, it kind of gets that uniform of everything is at least 15 feet back from the curb, and things aren't like right there. Because again, I might have 10 feet of right of way, but you only have 5 feet, you only have 2. We're just saying 15, everything's kind of uniform. But I would be comfortable removing number 2, if not combining it with 3.
The intent of number 3 is just to make sure that number 2 is being followed.
Is being followed, correct. So we could say, to ensure signs are not placed in the right-of-way, signs should be placed 15 feet back.
There you go.
Crafty. Yeah, I like it.
Bingo.
Exactly. Mr. Erickson.
Done.
Well, I'll just say, I like combining them, that way you've got both of them in there. I like the solution of the 15, that speaks to the layperson who may not understand the right-of-way situation, but also keeping the right-of-way. You're gonna cover yourself in those 2% of cases where 15 feet isn't enough.
Yep.
But again, not going to the mat on that one.
Everyone's tagging out. Mr. Foley.
That's our new code. We're not going to the mountain.
Exactly.
Here's a
Did you have any
curveball for
further?
you, though. What about an additional sign if you're on a corner lot, so each street facing?
Thanks a lot, Christopher. Thanks a lot.
Does it have its own tax ID?
We said per property.
Stay out of that visibility triangle, we're okay.
No, I'm fine with, I think the 2 flags and then the 1 sign, and then the election clause for, additional signs, right?
And I believe it was 2 signs, 2 ground-mounted signs is on the table, am I correct?
Yep, at this point, I'm at
Is that
the
your
2
understanding?
ground-mounted signs, and then ground-mounted signs shall not exceed the 6 square feet and 3 feet in height. And then the last thing was letter E, keeping letter E official signs.
So, in that context,
And then the last thing I wanted to come back to, circle back to,
Okay.
was the question of, under the topic of B, to keep it as saying non-commercial speech signs, or just saying signs. Again, the idea of saying just signs, that would capture any sign, would not require a permit as long as it's this, if it's
but
commercial
if you were
speech or
to,
non-commercial
if you were to
speech.
exceed any of these criteria, then you're in the permit world.
Then you're in the
is what we're
permit world.
saying. So we're kicking you out of the free and into the
Permit.
bureaucratic process, and, okay.
So to that extent, I actually would recommend, as we're talking about that, striking non-commercial speech and just saying signs.
I would be good with that, too.
That also removes them from having to filter what is commercial, not commercial.
Right, and I think
And
that's the,
and to Commissioner Yeager's sign, if then a real estate agent would like to put in one of those T-post signs that are more permanent, which, as we all know, what the real estate market is like right now, you're not even seeing those because the houses aren't on the market long enough to warrant one of
dig
those.
a hole.
But they could then come and we could easily issue them a permit to have it. And then, again, due to the size of those signs, that would help us to say, yeah, let's make sure you're putting it in the right spot before you dig a hole and put a post in.
So, Mr. Jansky, I believe by modifying number 5 to say no more than 2 ground-mounted signs are allowed per property, we have now taken flags out of the conversation.
Correct.
So is that our intent? Because I think we were playing the number 3 to allow you to have some combination of flags and signs. Now we've said you have a fixed number of ground-mounted signs, and we've now said you can have as many flags as you can put on a vertical pole.
On a single vertical wall?
Well, you could have multiple, or you could have angles off, so you can have a T off
A
of
guy
it
can do
as well.
semaphore?
We can do 4.
So, I mean, is that okay? Is that our intention, or do we want to be inclusive of the overall sign capacity on a site, which gets us back to either square footage or the number has to be inclusive, or some combination of ground mounted and, or could be no more than 3 signs, 2 of which can be ground mounted, and then you get the flags captured in there or something.
Mr.
Erickson,
Chair,
what's your thoughts?
as, yeah, I was kind of thinking along the lines as you were just saying is whether it's 2 ground mounted and 1 flag or 2 flags and 1 ground mounted, then we have to get into the sizing for the
Yeah.
the square footage. And then one thing I want to add too is we talked about increasing that size based on frontage. To me, I get uncomfortable with that because then you're giving more credence to like larger property owners, you know, and then it's kind of an equity issue. So I think we stick with size and number. But I think that's where I'm at is 2 flags and 1 ground mounted, or 2 ground mounted and 1 flag. It seems like a good trade-off to me.
And we're not including murals in there.
Although
Chair?
in that general sign, I noticed in that general sign description, I
That
felt
would
like
be
that
we could
include
have, I would say, a
murals.
discussion for the greater sign ordinance when we're doing the zoning code update.
Mr. Erickson, did you want to complete your thought?
Well, just to the comment, I felt like the general sign description did include murals. I forget how it was worded, but anyway, as you said, a discussion for another time.
Which is with the intent of informing or communicating, I think
Yep.
is sort of that clause that may free up art. Mr. Yeager?
Thank you. Yeah, just real quick. I guess what I was going to say is this discussion, the genesis of this discussion was ground-mounted signs. So would it be fair to say, let's address the ground-mounted sign conversation tonight? And if flags down the road should become a new problem that resurfaces, there's nothing saying we couldn't come back in and have a secondary discussion regarding flags. But as of right now, am I correct in understanding that flags aren't really the issue that's up for debate right now, or
should say
creating
that
creating the havoc?
The size of a flag has never been an issue. What has been on the flags has been, but by changing this ordinance, rightfully, the city has no business as to what is on the flag.
Right.
So what is on the flag is what we've gotten calls about before. Moving forward, the city has no business in what is on the flag. It'd be more of the size of the flag, and size of flags has never been a problem. So if you wanted to attempt to put up a Perkins flag, I guess you could, as the ordinance is written now. I've never seen someone who wanted to put up a Perkins flag in their front yard. I don't know if you can you'd have to have quite the pole height, and I think that would regulate you putting up a Perkins flag, because those things are like 15 by 20. So,
Proportionately, I have a neighbor that has a sign that is Perkins-like compared to the house, but you don't want to get into that.
We could come up with an algorithm for square foot of house per square foot of sign.
Exactly.
Yes, and it requires a slide rule. Figure it
I
out.
think city staff should work.
The calculator on the website.
You'll have to get a consulting firm to go
Right.
through the code at that point.
You've really challenged me, Mr. Yeager.
I'm sorry.
And I'm running around in my head, and I'm thinking that I do believe that the signs are integral, or the flag signs are integral to the disputes here, and so I'm trying to think about the unintended consequences versus the good intentions, right? And that's kind of where you're coming from, I think, right? To say, maybe we not go down the path, but I kind of feel like we have to have that in here just for the equity of how you're displaying your signs, and that's my thoughts on that. It's a great challenge question, and it's really got me stuck in my head as to how to address that.
The average flag you buy at Menards and hang on your house is 3 by 5. It's 15 square feet.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair, to Commissioner Yeager's point there, if you wanted to regulate against size flags as well, you would likely need to create an additional thing that says 6 square feet for ground mounted, 3 by 5 for the flags. Again, make the argument of simplicity, I would argue again, just from my staff's perspective, my department's perspective, we have never received a complaint that someone's flag was too big. And so there's that aspect. Flags versus ground mounted. Again, flags are up in the air, so you have to generally look up to see them, versus a ground mounted that's kind of at your site level. And that's where, again, we want to look at, I think the idea of regulating size and height is because, again, I will see a ground mounted sign. If I want to look at a flag, I will have to look up to look at it. So there's that kind of aspect too, where you would want to regulate the size of the sign on the ground versus the size of the flag in the air.
I'm not as interested in regulating the size of the flags. That, you know, what may be helpful is just in a way referencing flags that may be mounted to a pole that are not flags, because flag is specifically defined in a way that it contains distinctive colors, patterns, symbols, emblems, insignia, or other symbolic devices. And, you know, and that may be, you know, by being able to tease out, you know, how flags are defined, it's what's left then falls under a sign that's mounted to a pole, and then can be into this number 3, limit of 3, not more than 2 of which can be ground mounted. It's sort of a way to think about it.
It could be as simple, Mr. Chair, as potentially saying, again, kind of what I'm gathering from hearing from the commission could be no more than 2 flags and 2 ground-mounted signs are allowed per property. That allow you to have your American flag and your POW flag or whatever combination, and your 2, whether it be on a pole or off your house, you know, on a standalone flagpole or coming off your house, and still have 2 yard signs.
I can wrap my head around that.
I'm fine.
And then again, for the ground-mounted signs, we're saying 6 square feet, 3 feet tall flags, we're not touching size-wise.
All right, any other guidance to staff on the inserted language? Anything you want to discuss that's in the language that's been deleted? David had a number of items highlighted that he wanted to get our feedback on as well, so.
And Mr. Chair, again, those are not pressing items, so again, being cognizant of the time, those are things that definitely can come back at a later discussion if the commission would prefer. My thought was, as long as we are open, have the sign ordinance open, I'd at least want to draw those out, but again, those are not pressing items. Those are items we can discuss later on down the road in our, either at a later meeting, at a workshop, or in the overall zoning code update.
Just thinking about verbiage real quick, looking at number 3, signs shall be placed no less than 15 feet from the back of the curb and shall not be within the site visibility triangle. And then can we add or within the right of way and just combine those 2 that way? Just add another prepositional phrase on there.
We could do it that way. My other comp thought was just saying, right off the front end, just saying in an effort to keep or to ensure that signs are not placed in the right of way. We can do it whichever way. Either add it as an additional prepositional phrase at the end, or tack it onto the front. I am indifferent. If you feel that the verbiage would be better on the end, we'll put it on the end.
I think that seems a little more simple and easy to understand.
Put it on the end. Problem.
Adding a prepositional phrase on is pretty simple.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
You may.
Kind of guidance from here forward. The question I have now, I think at this point from the commission is, are you, and I can read off again the notes the changes, recommend changes the commission has made. Are you comfortable making a motion to direct staff to present this as an amendment to the city council? Or do you want to come back or do you want staff to come back in April with this redrafted for your review?
You're looking at me, so I'm good with staff rewriting this and presenting it. I think that we've got a pretty good grasp of what we're after here, and that's where I'm at. We've been given the task to do this. Let's do it.
I would concur, and I would believe the city council owes us dinner now. I did. The subject for them.
Ms. Woodward?
Dinner sounds nice.
Dinner sounds nice.
Yes, I concur.
I concur. I'm surprised you're not looking at me for dinner.
Up there.
I'm fine with what we ended up carving out here.
Yeah. We've definitely made an improvement.
So you've got
Yep,
some
so Mr.
guidance here.
Chair, a motion that I'd be looking for from the planning commission tonight
Okay.
would be to adopt the recommended changes to the sign ordinance as they relate to non-commercial speech signs, with the following changes being to combine numbers 2 and 3 under B, to change number 4 to say ground-mounted signs, to change number 5 to speak to say no more than 2 ground-mounted signs and 2 flags are allowed per property, to keep set point E, official signs, and finally to strike non-commercial speech from B, just to only say signs.
And before we look for a motion, this is probably an opportunity to pick off some pretty easy typos that exist in the ordinance right now. I would say on page 37.9, 515, 3710A, what is an R4 and an R5 district? Those are probably obsolete, and we don't have 1A in there. So I might ask you to give some attention to that. 37.9, page 37.9, please, James. There you are. R4 and R5 districts probably are obsolete. It'd be my interpretation of that, so that's a housekeeping. We don't have 1A in there, so that's just.
Is that something you want to strike now or leave for the general update of the zoning code? Would be my question.
Mr. Erickson,
Because
how do
as
you
part of
feel
the-
about having noise in your, in the draft coming to you?
The only reason I bring that up, Mr. Chair, is because as part of the updating of the zoning code, we're going to be looking at redrafting our zoning districts. And so this will have to get changed anyway.
Well, the absence of a district, you're missing a district that we have, and so 1A is not in there, and so, so if we're making amendments to language that regulates and ties back and references back to that section, I just feel like we ought to, at least if you want to add 1A in, but if you're marking that one in, you might as well take the other 2 out.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Chair,
Hey, Mr. Erickson.
a comment or question to David. I'm comfortable with it going to council as we've discussed and with the changes you'll make. Will the city attorney have a chance to review it?
Yes,
prior
he
to
will.
that?
I'll make the changes, and I would with any ordinance change, it would go to the city. It would go to the attorney prior to formally going to. And this already is in the attorney's hands.
Yeah.
And discuss most of this with him, but some of these other changes would go before him, before it went to the council. Did it die?
Everyone should look at James right now,
What's up?
preferably with a general look of disdain.
And another, if we
still up.
want to if we want to have some discussion on Section A that you've reintroduced or recrafted or inserted, you know, because the city of Brainerd recognizes the importance of free speech as supported by the Supreme Court of the United States, I think we should move item 2 to be the first finding of fact. Signs provide an important medium through which individuals may convey a variety of messages, and I think that's a positive reflection of the city's recognition of the importance of free speech. Along with that are all these responsibilities and issues that follow. That would be a suggestion that I would make. I don't know if there are any other comments on that.
Is that like a
Part
preamble?
A,
Or what do we,
that is the first page of the,
okay, are you changing it, or are you just,
moving it up
Ordering
in
one,
order.
switching 1 and 2.
Yep.
okay.
Is there any other reactions or thoughts on this?
I think that's a good idea.
For David, or?
The simple switch.
So with that, if there's no further discussion, I'd be looking for a motion, as David had read it to us, with the addition of a reordering of the finding of facts under section 371A. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
I would either need to have you run through that summary again, or I'll just say so moved as presented.
I can run through it again, and then you can say so moved. Is that how you would like it?
Please.
Sure. Okay. Again, so adopting the changes as regard to non-commercial speech signs in section 515-37 with the changes of combining numbers 2 and 3 under 37-5B, changing number 3 to say, 2 and 3, say number 4 to say ground-mounted signs, number 5 to say no more than 2 ground-mounted signs and 2 flags, to keep letter E, official signs, to strike the words non-commercial speech from section 515-37B, to move 37-1A number 2 to number 1, and then finally under to section 37-10A add the R1A district and remove R4 and R5 districts.
Is that your motion?
Move to recommend as presented, thanks.
Okay, we have a motion on the table, second?
Second, Yeager.
Yeager, second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say aye. All right, that motion passes. David, you've got your work.
So at this point, I would ask the commission, do you care to discuss these other items, or would you prefer to save them for another time?
I
Being
was hoping
cognizant that
to
it is 8
break the
o'clock.
park record, but we're not gonna break
Oh,
park.
Park record has a 4-hour.
I think it went down the minute that you raised the flag thing on my head. You lost me there. So, folks comfortable with maybe another 30 minutes, or are we pretty much run this as much as our brains are gonna go?
I'm good with either way.
Another 30 minutes?
That's fine.
I
Your
will,
floor,
I will work
David.
to go quickly. So again, the first item I had on there was regarding the changeable copy signs. Again, I'm not sure if there's a reason that the desire was to specifically call out changeable copy signs and restrict them. Is there a desire to continue to do that? I guess we'll just start there.
Would these be those little trailer signs with the arrow and all the light bulbs and you can put your own, to me, that was an issue a couple decades ago.
Bingo today?
So,
Yeah.
You know?
and again, I think there's probably a history here as to why they're it's so
Well, they were quite
specific.
popular with teenagers when I was a kid, with a little, this thing going on.
And I will say, like, for
Yeah.
example,
Not
this-
me
the-
specifically, but teenagers that I knew at the time, yeah.
The city's ground mounted, their monument sign right here at the corner would be considered a changeable copy sign.
Right.
Is there, right now, excuse me, a changeable copy sign would not be allowed in someone's yard. It is prohibited outside of being specifically allowed in commercial districts. Is there a reason to prohibit them, is my question, at this juncture? Or does the commission seem to fit just to leave it as it is, it's fine, it's not hurting anyone?
Feels fine. I don't know if others.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Erickson.
so essentially it's redundant to have it in here is essentially what you're saying.
It's not redundant. What I'm saying is right now under this section you see up, it is saying it is prohibited except by 37-10, which regards commercial districts. In commercial districts, they are regulated and allowed. You, however, could not put up a 6 square foot, no taller than 3 feet high, changeable copy sign in your yard.
Let me make a call. Take it down.
Call a friend.
So outside of commercial districts, essentially they are prohibited.
I have a, could I present a scenario that might?
may.
I wonder, so I was thinking about what Chair Duvall was talking about, the sign with the, kind of the arrow, that the workaround would be to throw it in your flatbed of your truck or trailer.
Those are portable signs.
Okay,
Those are regulated elsewhere and require a
all right,
permit.
perfect.
Other thoughts on the question that David's put on the table?
If there are no concerns, then
Just
I have
leave
no
it.
concerns.
That'd be my leaning. I see no concern to just leaving it.
Move down to the next one then. The next one had to do with rooftop signs. So in this section here, we're under general regulations 37-9. Number of cases, the top of a wall sign, including its superstructure, if any, shall be no higher than the top of the roof of the building to which it may be attached. So in this situation, I'm talking about wall signs. Now and then you'll see it where part of the sign extends past the roof. In certain situations, you could argue that it is necessary for them to exceed, because if they only have, if they have an overhang around a building and the overhang is only 2 feet, now you're restricted to that sign being only 2 feet tall. So I do have a concern there, is if we do not allow them to go, if the wall-mounted sign higher than the roof line, and the building has a commercial building with a flat roof, we actually do have some non-conforming signs out there. Technically, the ordinance, the sign cannot go past the ledge of the roof on a flat roof building. Again, if the building has a 2 foot, an overhang that's about 2 feet tall, you're pretty restricted unless you start going below it. I just had a thought there. Any thoughts? Problem, not a problem?
It strikes me that a sign that would be above the roof would probably be exposed to some additional wind shear. And I'm wondering if those are ways of being able to keep signs from being torn off or
And to that perspective, any sign of this nature, it would require, again, with a sign permit, and every time we do a sign permit, one of the requirements of the permit is the mounting method, and the mounting method is reviewed by the building official. So if there was concerns that it would be ripped off, the building official does approve the mounting method of a sign.
This feels like the 15 feet from the curb. It's an easy way to to sort of communicate that you don't want to have staff trying to figure out exactly where the right-of-way ends for a sign to be put in, and doing the math to see whether the design of the sign above the roof line is sufficiently braced in order to be able to handle most expected wind shear. I mean, that seems like that's what it's trying to do to me. I don't know.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Can, Ms. Chansky, can you speak to, is this in application to roof-mounted signs also, or only wall-mounted signs that extend past the plane?
So roof-mounted signs are further down that I have
Okay,
questions
gotcha,
about.
gotcha. Because we do have lots of examples of roof-mounted signs.
Yep,
in
and we're gonna
Brainerd.
talk about there, because I feel like the
Okay.
ordinance is inconsistent there as well. So this is, yeah, specifically about ones that are on the face of a wall that have edge that goes above the roof, specifically on buildings that have flat roofs.
So if we can have roof-mounted signs, can you illustrate for me an example of where it would not be a great idea to have a wall-mounted sign that extends past the roof if we are allowed to have roof-mounted signs?
The only situation I would say would probably point out to Commissioner Duvall's point of wind shear issues, to which I go back again to mounting method is reviewed by the building official. So if he felt like it didn't have the correct mounting method with that in that perspective, then he wouldn't approve it.
With
That
that
is
being
just
said,
my only
I can see how this could be removed. That's my angle on it.
Other thoughts?
And again, I'm not looking for any specific direction this evening. I just wanted to, as long as we had, again, just tread out some thoughts and if we wanted to bring this back.
Would it be safe to say that some of these ordinances were crafted in a time where where the building inspection, where they were trying to combine some aspects of safe building technology into the ordinance? Would this be an example of that, Mr.
I think it could be. There might have been, again, maybe some design standard idea at that time as well. In my opinion, one of the things that already governs this is we already do limit the overall size. That's really the design standard, not whether or not it goes past the top of the roof. That is just my opinion. No further comments, Mr. Chair. I can move along.
Yep, move along, yep.
Hey, the next one, this is one that we've dealt with I don't want to say quite a bit, but we had a couple times in the last year and a half, is that right now in the B3 district, we allow you to have a projecting sign. So here's the wall, the sign sticks out like this. We allow you to have it and allow it to go over the right of way. Again, generally in the B3 district, we allow that because you have 0 lot lines. Where your door ends is where your lot line ends. What we have found, though, is that there have been, and in that situation, we allow it to stick out 5 feet beyond the wall, and it can go over the right of way. In all other situations, you can have a projecting sign. It can extend 5 feet out from the wall. However, it says may not project over any vehicular drive aisle or travel portion of a public or private street, and may not project over a public right of way. I have spoken with this in a couple situations when this has come up with the city engineer. To his opinion, again, this is where we come with some non-conforming lot issues, especially in the greater downtown area where something it's zoned B4, not B3, but again has essentially 0 lot lines. If someone wants to do that projecting sign, the aesthetics look fine, it meets the size requirement for a projecting sign, meaning that it has to be 50% of the maximum area, so they already have to be smaller than other signs, but they're not allowed. I have spoken to the city engineer, and his opinion would be, again, he'd have no problem with them extending over the right of way, as long as they're generally, say, 8 feet above the right of way. There's no, as long as we have enough clearance, he would have no problem with them being over the right of way, especially, again, looking at situations in our greater downtown area where we have essentially non-conforming B4 lots. That's where this issue comes up. So that was kind of a consideration of thinking, again, as we're looking at the code, our zoning code, do we want to look at that and say, well, in those cases, if the city engineer who governs the right of way or manages the right of way is okay, assuming there's enough clearance, do we want to allow that in other districts other than the B3?
Reflections on responses?
Sounds agreeable to me.
I agree, I have the same position. I think they're some of the best looking signs on downtown buildings. And
So, David, it would be all right to have a projecting sign over a drive aisle or a public or private street, travel portion?
Well, one of the things we have there is that 5 feet, so it can't project more than 5 feet. And that's the other aspect, is it's only coming off the feet for the 5 feet. So in some of these situations where people have wanted to do these, it is mainly projected over the right of way by 2 or 3 feet. And then was still, 8+ feet above the ground. You could still have that, okay, over a vehicular drive aisle. Maybe you want to reduce that again in case, the average vehicle is shorter than 8 feet, but a semi-truck's not. But I think the idea is the main ones that we've seen are issues of it's just a sidewalk underneath. And how do we want to, if it's just a sidewalk underneath, do we care if there's a projecting sign that's 9 feet above the ground?
Just to bring back a recent memory, we really caught the devil trying to limit the height of lights in parking lots to 13 feet because of potential collision with box trucks and things like that. And here we're at 8 foot, and 13 was problematic. And would the engineer be suggesting that would go up or down depending on the?
And it could. And again, 8 feet,
typical
8
kinds
feet
of
was
traffic?
just one scenario that we specifically looked at where it was just sidewalk underneath. You could definitely can keep language in there that talks about, well, if there's a vehicular drive aisle underneath, then it needs to be so tall, where it could be a kind of a scale depending on what it's projecting over.
Right, and I think the city maintains a 14-foot right-of-way over public thoroughfares, is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, and so,
And with that, I would heavily lean on the city engineer.
yeah,
for his opinion.
I would bring that back to Mr. Sandy, maybe to think about helping clarify if it's projecting over the public right-of-way, would we want it to at least be outside of the right-of-way, which is 14 feet up?
I guess for tonight, what I'm more looking for is the commission amenable to changing it where outside of, pretty much in any district, we would be willing to consider projecting signs over the right-of-way.
I'm giving you a yes with caveats.
Yes with caveats. And that's what I have written down, yes with caveats.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
along
Erickson.
those lines too, I guess even the 8 foot over just a sidewalk seems to maybe just a little slow. I know you're not looking for specifics, but walking on the sidewalk with, a child on the shoulders or something, maybe
Yep.
a little higher.
Good. And then, if there's no other comments, Mr. Chair, I can go to the next one.
Yep, move on, please. Thank you.
Commissioner Yeager, this is your question.
Hey.
Roof signs. M1 seems a little pointless. The height of a roof sign, I put the word roof in there, but we're talking about roof signs, shall not exceed the height of the roof.
what if it's a flat roof?
Exactly. That is my exact question is, I take the sign directly across the street over here above the law office. That's a flat roof. Technically, it can't exist because the roof is flat, so therefore no sign. Again, most of our buildings downtown are flat roofs. So kind of, it seems to defeat itself. I think we can still have, the sign shall be consistent with the building character, integrated in the building character, architecture. I think that goes with everything that we've been talking about and looking at our zoning code update. It's more of, height of the sign shall not exceed the height of a roof. What do we do in flat roof situations?
Mr. Chair, I have a thought.
Yes, Mr.
We have a
Yeager.
total building height. This seems like a perfect place, perfect fit for that. If you can have a roof mounted sign, as long as you're not over your total building height, is, I guess, what comes to my mind. But, don't know. I can only think of one example.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager.
And that may, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yep.
that may have been the intent of this section, and it just reads poorly. I just don't know the history. Again, one of the things I know I've told my staff, you know, with the zoning code update is to make it as clear as possible for even when I am gone, that the next person can step in and understand what the requirement in the ordinance is. And then, I want to make sure
There is a fair amount of subjectivity at number 2. Are you prepared to navigate that, Mr. Chansky?
and that'll be part of this, and that'll be part of the greater zoning code update, Commissioner Yeager, is what is the architectural design?
That is form, right there. Form is-
The other thing, again, going down, okay, we had to change a copy again. Here's another one we do work with, and I will say almost every one of our locations. I don't know the history, again, behind this. It seems that the city has almost ignored this section almost entirely. Talks about, in addition to the freestanding sign allowed in section 515-37-10.c, pretty much your pylon or your monument sign that every commercial is allowed. Convenience food uses with drive-through facilities may display additional signs provided that not more than one sign is allowed. Most drive-throughs have 223. You just look at McDonald's on Washington, on West Washington. There's 2 drive aisles. Each has a sign. Actually, I think each has 2 signs. There's 4. Pretty much, I think the city has ignored this section of the ordinance. You know, I agree with most of everything else in here. Signs shall be single-sided with the area except and shall not exceed 50 square feet. Seems fine. Haven't had an issue with that. Height of the sign shall not exceed 6 feet. Haven't had an issue with that. Seems pretty industry standard. Sign shall not encroach into any principal setback and shall be located directly adjacent to the drive-through aisle. It's been more of the one sign. My recommendation would be looking at maybe upping it to between 3 and 4. Again,
Or
just-
per entrance, one per entrance.
or per entrance, or, you know, the other thing that I look at, the comment that Mr. Mike Lamb mentioned as the zoning code says they are reflections of the market. In a coming into a post-COVID world, what we are going to see more of is drive-throughs. We're already seeing that. We're working with the future tenant of the old Tim Hortons. And it's going to be a coffee shop that intends to be drive-through only. They do not intend at any time to have a sit-down aspect to that restaurant. And I'm hearing, taking off planning hat, putting on economic development hat, is that's the way most places are going. I've heard some cases where even McDonald's, they're not even building new McDonald's, they're not even planning to have dining in areas. They're planning, I heard of a situation in southern Minnesota where it sounds like they're planning on ripping down the existing McDonald's, then building 2 miniature ones next to each other so they can have 4 drive-through lanes. So on the same lot, 2 small buildings, each with a kitchen, each with 2 drive-through lanes. That's where we're going, I would say, for at least the next decade. This 7A hampers that greatly. And maybe it's the city saying, well, we don't want to go that way of drive-through only. But there's that balance of, we don't want drive-through only, but then we might end up with no businesses or no new growth. So, again, an item I think for further consideration, I just wanted to call out and maybe you can start thinking about as we look at the greater zoning code of what is the market looking like for the next decade. And I think that what the market's looking like for many restaurants that aren't is they're getting away from sit down. Especially, I would say anything from the fast casual to the fast food, coffee shops. You're going to see less and less sit down as a result of COVID-19. So,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Erickson.
quick comment on 7C. I think even the current drive-through signs would probably not comply with that. I haven't measured, but just, it says 6 feet from the base. And,
most of the new ones we have permitted, we have made sure they actually are 6.
All right.
So, was one thing, with, for example, Starbucks, that was made sure it was 6. They pushed 6. They're kind of right at 6.
Okay. I
But-
stand corrected.
That's generally where they're at. I think I've had one time where someone kind of pushed back against the 6, and I said, well, you could, you have an option, like, well, can I get a variance? And I can say, you can apply. I can't say I can support the hardship, but only one time have I had someone push back against the 6-foot height.
Well, I'm hearing basically, I think there's general, I don't think anyone's got reactions to this, and maybe look to you to maybe come in with what a modern standard might look like for today and tomorrow's.
Yep, and that's really, Mr. Chair, kind of what the point of this was. More of not necessarily, let's get some direction so we can get an amendment in. I just want to put that before you, as I do plan as we get further along in the zoning code update, that these items will come up, and I just want to make sure that you are aware of them and can kind of be thinking about some of these issues, especially this last one there, as it regards to, it does have greater economic development implications. So, with that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have on the signs.
So, for this, David, can you help us think about coming back to this and dealing with these issues, maybe fishing for any other issues that the council may have or the commission may have? Where does this stand in the queue of other similar tasks that we've had? We've had a few items that we've briefly touched on, and we'd come back. One was, I think, the food overlay district. And
I actually do have a comment on that. I have
Okay.
for my
so I'm just trying to
commissioner's
think
comment
about when we
section.
might bring this back for
this-
further discussion.
This
again,
one's
floating
spec-
up additional recommendations
Yep.
for the signs.
This one specifically, again, these ones are all, again, like roof-mounted signs. I don't think I've approved or had an application for a roof-mounted sign in the 2 years that I've been with the city. Some of these issues are not, the projecting sign, there's been 1 or 2 questions about that. I think these are more bigger things that we can address through the zoning code update process with the Swanson Haskamp team. They don't need specific action today, in the next month and a half. It's more of, let's just kind of think about some of these things as we, get to this section as part of the zoning code update. Other pieces like the food truck, which I'll address during my comments. I think we will be looking for some more upcoming action, only because there may be some implications yet this year. And again, everything that we do, we're making sure we're working with the Swanson Haskamp team to ensure that no action is taken that would negate any element of the zoning code update or have to be redone because it didn't fit the overall update.
Thank you. All right, I do believe that wraps up the sign. Agenda item 7B. So we are now public forum. James, do we have anybody online? All right, I will dispense with the public forum, having no one here. Open and closed at 8:28. Community Development Director's report. David.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So, talking about food trucks, this was a discussion that we had back in the fall. Kind of tabled it for a bit because we had some other pressing things. However, as we're getting closer to the summer, we have started to get some food truck applications in. And so what I do want to do is I would like to have this on the April Planning Commission, a minimum on the April Planning Commission agenda. Specifically, again, looking at, not necessarily, I think our biggest thing we like to look at is the overlay districts, not necessarily the requirements of the food trucks, overlay districts. Maybe considering, right now, again, we have a $300 fee, it's for an entire summer. Maybe considering if we want to do a one-time event option. But really more looking at where can they operate, under what conditions can a food truck operate. The question I have for the commission in that regard is this. Is this an item that you would like to discuss at a regular meeting? For example, the April 21st meeting is when you meet next. Or is this an item you feel more comfortable discussing in a workshop setting? We do have 5 weeks before because March has 5 Wednesdays, we do have 5 weeks before the next Planning Commission meeting.
Thoughts?
I'm good either way. Just if we can get it into a regular meeting, I say we get it into a regular meeting. If we feel like it's a topic that's gonna go 2 hours, then obviously that's a work session. So it might be better to see if we can get a feel on how long we think we wanna talk about this.
How full is your agenda?
At this time for April, what we would anticipate, in some way, shape, or form would be the food truck ordinance. I'm going to be speaking shortly that the Swanson Haskamp team does plan on being before the Planning Commission again in April. I'm not sure how long that item should last. And then there may be potentially 2 preliminary plats before the commission in April. And then the last thing, which would actually be probably a very quick item, would be the public hearing and voting to recommend adoption of the amendment to the comprehensive plan for the future land use map. That is an item that you just pretty much hold the public hearing and then vote to send to the council. So that item would be quite short. My guess is that the food truck discussion would likely be the longest item on the agenda. The 2 plats are essentially replats, so they'd be rather simple.
Mr. Chair, I think I'd be okay with it as a regular item on the agenda, I would think. Unless somebody else has other preference.
I think that would be my preference. At least to start, and then maybe break to a
We can do that.
workshop. If
I'm sorry, Mr. Foley, I'm sorry I didn't hear you.
Well, my preference would be to have the discussion at the next regular meeting, and if it turns into something pretty involved, maybe consider breaking to a workshop from there.
And this is one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because this is one of those items while these contract with Swanson Haskamp is to look at our code, they aren't going to be getting so specific into every little section of our ordinance going, okay, let's talk about every word out of our food trucks. And this is where they're kind of looking at us. If there is a section that you really want to get deep into, you as staff with the planning commission kind of get deep and then bring it back to us saying, here's what was discussed, here's how we'd like to change it. They don't intend to get into, except for specific sections like our residential districts and that, they don't intend to get, word by word for every section of the ordinance. So this would be one of those sections that I would say would not be kind of covered, an in-depth analysis would not be covered under their contract.
Mr. Erickson?
Yeah, so I guess I was gonna suggest a workshop, whether we do the regular meeting first and then move into workshop. It can become someone's favorite topic or least favorite topic. And I don't know, if we do a workshop, I think, maybe we could pull some examples and see some visuals. I think visuals really help. And not that we couldn't do that in a regular meeting, but I was leaning towards a workshop. I know nobody likes more meetings, but I'm not going to the mat on it, but I was gonna throw out
And another option, Mr. Chair, if I may, another option which the commission has done before is you could also say, instead of doing a full workshop with the entire commission, you could assign a subcommittee to work with staff on this and bring a recommendation to the full commission. That is something we have done before as well.
Okay.
If there are 2 or 3 commissioners, it needs to be less than 4, who feel passionate about food trucks, the commission could assign them to work with staff on this issue.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Woodward, do you have any thoughts on this?
I am trying in my head to figure out how I would make it to an extra meeting. I'm not sure I would. So combining them and having a longer meeting in one evening would be better for my schedule.
Well, I'm on the workshop camp myself, so I wonder if maybe the idea of breaking a small group out to maybe try and draft something that can be presented at the April meeting, and I would be willing to do that. I don't know, Mr. Erickson, if you'd be willing to be a part of that. Is there anyone else that'd be interested in doing that?
Well, I would. My perspective on this, and I'll be straight out, is I think the food truck ordinance right now is absolutely restrictive, and it's anti-business, and I would love to see most of it get gutted. But that's just me. So I have a strong point of view. I'll warn you right now. I just think it throttles innovation, but that's another subject for another day. But again, I'm only into having so many meetings personally. Well, whatever.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this feels like a topic to me personally that's not a good fit for a subcommittee, just because it's so opinion-based. It's not really to me, a good fit for a subcommittee is go find the information and then bring it back to us and let us talk about it. I think that this has the potential to be highly discussed within this. We're going to the mat.
We're going to the mat.
We're going to the mat on this one. So I would, whatever the case, I'd like to see us all together as a group. I think it may actually be a time saver in the end, but maybe not. I don't know.
Well, then I think hearing that, let's put it on the April agenda for the 21st. It may not be that involved, or it may be something that we may have to adjourn to another meeting or adjourn to a workshop and finish it up, so.
Sounds good. The last 2 other items I have, Mr. Chair, are more informational, will be quick. Update on the zoning code update. Next process is the Swanson Hescamp team. They have identified, we'll be holding 2 TAG, which stands for Technical Advisory Group meetings between now and the April meeting. Those meetings are to discuss certain elements that's kind of already been touched on so far. If I can pull it up from Jennifer, here we go. What the purpose of these TAG meetings are. Excuse me, I'm opening up that document. The first is just kind of an existing conditions, physical analysis, GIS analysis, target areas. They want to confirm some observations from the walking tour that was held in October, some findings that they found on GIS regarding non-conforming properties, ID areas where additional feedback discussion is needed, and confirm target areas discussed during concept plan discussion. That's the first one. We're having that next Thursday. Again, with a lot of these technical advisory groups, they're looking for specific, there'll be a staff and some other specific members looking for very specific information. For this first one, again, it'll be Administrator Bergman, myself, James, Engineer Sandy, Eric Charpentier from the HRA, Commissioner Duval as representing the commission as the chair, and actually Commissioner Yeager will also be present representing the Park Board.
Oh, that's right.
And the Parking Commission. And then we also have a member of the EDA participating in that as well. And then the second one is going to be a little even more specific and even a more smaller group, technical group. Again, what that one is looking, they just want to run past some existing code identification and really kind of what they plan on doing at the April 21st meeting is essentially presenting their, what's the word that they're looking, what they have? It's essentially their, I can't remember what they called it in their code, is their synopsis or their outline, proposed outline for the zoning code. And so these two tag meetings are just helping them finalize some few items as they prepare that analysis for the planning commission in April to say, you know, here's how we're recommending kind of approaching the code as we get into actual analysis of the code. And the final thing is, I think I've mentioned the parking commission before. The parking commission has met 4 times. They actually meet tomorrow. Again, some of the things that the parking commission is going to be discussing may end up back in front of the planning commission for some review and consideration. Just wanted to keep you aware of that. Tomorrow, they're actually going to be discussing, they're going to be making an interim report to the city council. They're going to be discussing that report. Once that report is made to the council, I intend to also make that available to the planning commission, just so you also are aware of the things that they're going to be discussing over the next year, kind of in preparation of if something comes before you, you kind of know where the parking commission is going should items for discussion or consideration come before this commission. Mr. Chair, that is all I have tonight.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Jansky. Agenda item 10, commissioners' questions and comments.
Did you say a year on the parking commission?
That's what we said from the very beginning.
Okay.
Goal is by the end of the year. End of
That's
the
all I
year.
have, sir.
Comments, questions? Hearing none. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Gorham, second?
I will second that.
Ms. Woodward, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are formally adjourned. Thank you.